So Lucy?
Yeah, because salt was like the delicacy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that made all the difference.
So thank you all for coming. This is the panel on healthcare IT, or digital health as I think it's more commonly known. I'm Kerry Adams of Almond Capital in Sacramento, California. Before I introduce the panel, I'd like to ask by a show of hands whether you all are entrepreneurs. How many entrepreneurs? How many investors? How many of you consider yourselves experts in IT? How many consider yourselves expert in healthcare? Very good. Well, we have a distinguished panel, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, to say a bit about himself or herself, their fund, their location, what stages they invest in, where the fund is in its life cycle, and describe briefly what attracts you to digital health investing. So why don't we start with Alexander?
Okay, sure. So, make sure that I remember all the things I'm supposed to say about
Right, I know.
So, I'm at Johnson & Johnson. I'm actually based here in San Diego, so for a change I don't have to travel to be at a conference. We have, obviously, JGDC, our venture capital fund. It's an evergreen fund founded in the 70s, and historically it has really focused mostly on investments in products. However, more recently we've taken an interest in digital health and health tech. And the reason is that we view that as an integral part of moving the field forward, both in terms of enhancing R&D and driving future R&D productivity, as well as driving solutions that improve outcomes and getting patients really the things that they need. And for us, as a fund, it is critical that we have a linkage between what we as a fund do and what the company does as a whole. And so the way we typically invest is that there has to be co-investment internally, meaning risk sharing. And that's very important. That way our fund stays connected to what the company is doing. That's different from other companies. Other companies sort of allow more greenfield, further away things. For us, that was just a little, we wanted to sort of keep it tight and together that way. We have made numerous investments in the digital health and health tech space, and expecting to continue to do that. We typically, I would say, wouldn't really go before Series A, and even probably tending towards later in the digital health space, that is. So what that means is here typically we would like to see some customers and some revenues. I think that's it.
Great. Naveed, I didn't mean to leave you off there.
No,
We'll
no
try to
problem.
vary the order.
I thought you were going alphabetical by first name, maybe. So I'm a co-founder and managing partner at Analytics Ventures. We are very local, like Alexander. We're literally across the street, so it was a very convenient conference for me. We are, I like to say, a venture fund operating under a venture studio model, where we're co-founding companies with other scientists, academics, corporations, large and small. Focus on any vertical, although healthcare and digital health is our favorite space, any vertical that is applying AI and machine learning to data. So we've talked to, outside of the healthcare space, the CEO of Sempra Energy about helping them in forming a utility analytics company. So we would never do that if we didn't have access to their data. And then in the healthcare space, which is definitely our favorite, and we think San Diego is a great place for that convergence of life science and software. We started companies like CureMatch with co-founders such as Dr. Roselle Kurzak she's the deputy director at the Moore Cancer Center, and another gentleman who's at the Supercomputer Center. So that's a company where, and when I say venture studio, we literally helped co-found these but for us they wouldn't exist. These two amazing, brilliant scientists would have never started a company. So we met them, we validated what they were doing, we licensed it out of UC San Diego, put in the first money, got the CEO. They got into Janssen Labs at Johnson & Johnson's incubator here locally in Torrey Pines. And so I like to say we're company builders fitting the missing puzzle pieces. And we get involved at literally the inception. And our goal is to help companies get through that valley of death, as they call it, from inception to Series A. While getting a Series A does not guarantee companies going to be successful, most companies do fail before getting to that point, and a lot of them frankly deserve to fail. But a lot of companies have something there, and they have difficulty getting through that. So that's where we come in, very hands-on, operational at the beginning, to help companies get to that point where then the later stage investors can come in and take it to the next stage.
Great, thanks. Taha?
Hey everyone. Just out of curiosity, who hates electronic health records here? Nobody? So there we go. So and no one here is from Epic either, right? I tend to get in trouble when I talk about these things. HealthX Ventures is an early stage venture fund based out of Madison, Wisconsin. So we have close Epic ties. Try to make them more of an open system. I personally go back and forth between Madison and Houston, Texas, where I'm an advisor for the Texas Medical Center there. HealthX Ventures is an early stage fund. It's a $21 million fund. We tend to write check sizes from about $300,000 to $800,000. Seed and Series A generally. And one of the things we really look for is, outside of the team, is it something that works within the clinical workflow, or is it something that's actually making an impact of digital health? I'd say at a high level, that's where our investment thesis is. Good, I guess. I'm the outsider today, so but yeah, I'd love to learn more. Looking forward to this panel.
Great, thanks. Ilana?
Thank you all for coming today. So DEFTA Partners is an old new VC. We're actually 2 decades old, founded by George Hara. He's Japanese, so we have offices in Tokyo plus in San Francisco. So I'm close, but not right across the street, which would have been nice. So when George launched the firm many years ago, he was basically a high-tech guru, and he sort of saw the future of high-tech and the communications revolution and computer revolution happening before his eyes, and sort of jumped on it. And needless to say, he was very successful, and so he's more of a philanthropist now. And I think this is important to note because you'll kind of get a sense of what we invest in from this little brief history. Because of this, he became an advisor to Prime Minister, oh my gosh, well, the Japanese Prime Minister. Yeah, thank you, Avi. I just lost my brain here today. It's been a tough day. Very, very productive, but food. As a result of that, we all have seen the super aging populations, but it's really critical and very pronounced in Japan. And so the healthcare costs, needless to say, are escalating there. And as an economic advisor, it was incumbent upon him to find sort of ways to address that. And he said, well, I know I've always been in high tech, but this is the beauty of the times. The two fields are merging, and why don't we launch a healthcare technologies fund? So we're doing 2 things. We're investing in advanced therapeutics, and that's more my background. I'm ex-Genentech and RegenMed and health IT. So I'm talking about the other half of the portfolio now, and it's the health IT. And we're looking for game changers, but of course they've got to produce. So we're looking for ones that have great futures. We just launched, or we're formally launching tomorrow, but actually we've been investing in 5.5 companies today, one of which is Two Poor Guys. I don't know if you heard of them. They're point of care. They just got picked up for the next round by Khosla. So those are the types of things we'll do, and we could talk more about that.
Great, thanks. You mentioned you were in regenerative medicine, and now you're in digital health. And I have to ask, was it because you see a connection there, or regenerative medicine was just taking too long to mature, and digital health offers a faster track?
Well, I'm actually a lawyer by training, so I'm admitting that right now, which means, though, that as a lawyer, you're a generalist. You pick up on, I had to be a lawyer in many different technologies, so I know who to hire when I need to do the diligence. I know the big picture. I know the questions to ask. So it doesn't really matter if I'm looking at, a therapy versus a digital health application. And so it wasn't a love for one versus the other. I love both of them. And I love having a portfolio of both because you can balance it. You could take the longer term risks with your therapies, and then you can have, like, look, I've already, we've done quite well with 2 poor guys, and it happened in 6 months. So it's beautiful to have a very broad portfolio. So I think that's an attractive feature of it.
So healthcare IT or digital health can be divided up in many different ways, many different subsectors. And doing a little research before this panel, you saw big data analytics, workflow management, remote sensing, telehealth, population health management, artificial intelligence. What sectors do you find particularly interesting, and what companies would you point to as an example of something that's interesting to you? And why don't we start with you, Naveed?
Yeah, I mean, with us specifically, with AI and machine learning being our focus, irrespective of vertical, but healthcare being 18% of the U.S. economy is in massive need of innovation. And it was Mark Cuban that said a few months ago at a conference, if you're not thinking of how AI and machine learning is going to impact your respective vertical, you're going to be a dinosaur in the next 2-3 years. Now, the 2-3 years might be 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, but we agree with that premise that AI and machine learning is going to impact everything, especially in healthcare. And it's something where anywhere there's data is the 21st century's oil. You could be the Saudi Arabia of oil, but if you can't access that data, it's useless. You haven't unlocked the value. You need the AI and machine learning, which is the refinery, to get that oil and turn it into gas. And so that's where what we're finding is there is just a hunt for talent for these people that are machine learning experts. And the Googles and Facebooks and Amazons and Apples are literally picking them off out of academia. And so I think the challenge right now is, as an investor, there are a lot of people that slap machine learning on their LinkedIn and they don't really know much about machine learning. And so that's one thing where we said, well, if we're going to tackle these problems, it's hard for a company to hire data scientists at $150K a pop minimum that don't want to take a risk of being at an early company. So what we've done to address that is we formed our own AI lab of data scientists, where then we use them at all our companies, so they're de-risked. And so that's where we think with all the data in the healthcare space, whether it's in EMR or it's in drug discovery or clinical trials or personalized precision medicine, it's all in the data. And now with computing power having gone up and storage costs going down, that's why we're at this, I think, amazing time in history where people are going to look back and say, it was that 5 to 7 year period that really, so much has happened. In modern medicine, I forgot who was saying it, I didn't say it, someone on a panel was saying we're going to see more happen in more improvements in innovation in the next 10 years than the last 100. And a lot of that is going to be getting value out of that data.
Can you point to a company or two to illustrate what you think is a good application of AI and machine learning to a specific application in healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first I'll mention the ones that we're not involved with. So I mean, you have HLI, Human Longevity Inc., which right here in San Diego, Craig Venture's company. So they're at the forefront of what they're working on. More controversial up in LA is obviously NantHealth, so they're working on amazing stuff. And there's obviously controversy with the founder there, but they're very prominent in the space. You have your Guardant and Foundation Medicines that are obviously at the forefront of innovation right now. And then two of our companies to mention very quickly that we're obviously drinking the Kool-Aid of and fully support. One is CureMatch that I was mentioning, was in the Janssen Lab incubator, where their algorithms are going through their proprietary database of FDA-approved drugs, and out of millions of combinations, they come up with a recommendation 1, 2, 3 for each patient-specific cancer. So out of tens of millions of combinations, they are providing this to the oncologist as a decision support tool. And so the oncologist ultimately, it doesn't have to go through FDA because it's the oncologist that decides if they're going to administer that combination of drugs. But this is something that, you asked Dr. Kurzrock, and she said, you told me we could do this 5 years ago, and I would say no way. But it's because of this increase in computing power and storage costs coming down that they can crunch through these massive amounts of data. Another company that's a little more mature, similar sounding name, but they're older, is Curemetrics, where these guys did work for NASA, detecting anomalies in space weather, and now they're applying their AI machine learning to detect breast cancer, for example, in mammograms earlier and better than any other company out there. And they've gone head-to-head with Hologic, Siemens, Philips, and they're in talks with all of them because even with these companies and the billions of dollars behind them, and they can't do what this team here in San Diego is able to do. But it's because of the expertise. So IBM Watson can throw money at these problems all day long, but the problem is Watson is trying to fit every problem to their solution. And they're saying, use our solution, use our platform, but you can't do that. You have to apply the algorithms and come up with the machine learning for each specific problem in that vertical. And so that's where we think the platform play of the Watson does not necessarily apply as well when they just try to make everyone use it.
Great, thanks, Navid. Alexander, I know you mentioned solutions that improve outcomes and that relate to other initiatives within J&J. Can you identify some companies or sectors that are particularly interesting to you? My partner, Christian, likes to say it's 18% of the U.S. economy, but it's not a big lake. It's more like a bunch of narrow gullies, different specialties, different little sectors. What is it that attracts you to this digital company and not that one?
Sure, let me just say that we are interested in, at the high level, a few different types of companies. So one series of companies is all about achieving best health outcomes for patients, and I already mentioned that before. And that has many sort of things underneath that. And by the way, in my mind, AI, machine learning is one part of it, but it's not the whole story.
Absolutely.
Right? So what we're interested in are things that change behavior of patients, help them understand, and so that includes also predictive analytics to understand how do you address and engage different patients differently. It also requires deep domain specificity in diabetes or in oncology or in orthopedics. It's not one size fits all by a long shot. The other area that I personally am very interested in, and I see this sort of becoming more and more relevant, is spawning out of the personalization, which in of itself also is a form of improving health outcomes. And of course, personalization, then that results in a really deep interest in genomics. How does genomics, the relationship between genotype and phenotype, how does that get modulated by other factors? And how do you put this all together in a way that, on the one hand, you can achieve the best outcomes for a patient for a drug that already exists or a treatment that already exists? And on the other hand, how can you develop new treatments that are not even on the market yet using that specific genotypic information? And that's an area that I personally am very passionate about. The example companies, of course, CureMatch and another one in JLabs, so Portable Genomics, are both companies that are really trying hard to understand this relationship between a particular patient, a particular drug, and their optimal outcome, and hope to find how you optimize around that. Another company that I've been very interested in is Evidation Health. They collect reams of EMR data and behavioral data because they understand that you need to bring these things together to really make some impact and some fundamental changes. And then lastly, I would say companies like Omada that are very oriented towards making interventions that actually stick. It's one thing to know everything about these patients and how they behave and what's going to work well for them. It's a whole other thing to actually then make the change happen. And what Omada understands really very well is that this is multimodal. It is through emails, it is through text, it is through phone calls, it is through collecting data from wearables or scales or other methodologies like that and putting that all together. So those are sort of a few companies I would lift up.
Great. So Taha, you and I have invested, or your group and ours have invested in one company in common, but I understand that was before you joined. What is it that HealthX is looking for today, and what companies would you point to?
So definitely following up on the genomics side, I think that's an area that we've collectively actually as a firm been interested in. And in the Amada example, my big thing there is actually I'd love to maybe have this as a follow-on conversation, but how do these type of platforms scale, right? Because definitely that's a company that I'd love to look into, and really with the FDA now talking about digital health certification or trying to step in place of commercializing digital health, I mean, I think we'll have to see where the genomics conversation takes us. One of the things I personally look for is really going back, right? The value of digital health that exists today, it doesn't take as long for you to hit scale, and it's something that you can see directly. So holistically, I'm an innovation guy. That's kind of my whole area of focus where I've always been. But it's really, I always go back to the quadruple aim, right? And I know it's not talked about as much, but really, are you able to decrease cost? Are you able to increase access and increase quality of care? But now at the caregiver level, are you able to actually do something in their workflow where you can ease the burden for them and reduce that burnout? That's a framework that I love looking at. But at the same time, we're, as a firm, we're also interested on the platform model. So I'll give an example of, Medable. It's they recently just secured a partnership with Apple, and now they started off as a HIPAA compliant hosting platform, but quickly pivoted to building mobile apps for clinical research. And now what they're doing is actually creating predictive models for a lot of these clinical trials, and also allowing researchers to look at them in all the data in real time. So that's definitely an area that we're interested in. We're actually investors in Medable as well. But really, are you able to be easily deployed within a health system? Is integration really a problem for you? I personally am looking at companies that don't need to move that path, but also at the consumerism level of healthcare. A company that we've recently looked at is building on top of HCAHPS scores for these surveys that are happening as health systems turn more towards consumerist models. I mean, that's something that we have to collectively be cognizant of. So I hope that answers that question.
Very good. Ilana, what's really attractive to you in digital health, and what companies would you point to?
So, just for starters, I don't come to a conference like this and say, oh, I'm looking for one of these companies and one of those companies. I'm pretty open-minded, and a lot of the decision on whether to move forward with one versus another depends on a lot of the other aspects of the deal. It's the financial terms, it's my feeling about the team, the face-to-face. That's really important. Technology is important too, but you have to have these other elements. So first and foremost, there's no one size fits all. It's all about sort of seeing what's out there. And another way of looking at it too is I don't just look at, gee, I want, we do want AI, and we all say it internally. I'm like, but really, what does that mean? I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for investing in a technology that actually captures a lot of data, not necessarily manipulates the data. I'm a fan of data, so when I saw this one company, for instance, Origin, they're sort of a 23andMe, but they also are the world's largest living database, and that they're the largest repository of samples. So beautiful. They're getting the health information. Now they're going to blood samples, so they're going to be able to make iPS stem cell lines. I don't know if this crew knows what all that entails. But the beauty of that is that they have a way to sort of have many different types of income streams. And all of them will collect data, and then you'll be able to sell the data, just like 23andMe is selling its data. And they have gene kits too, so they're getting all of that data too. So it's just, the other side of the coin. And maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Great, well, thanks. And I'd just say for our own fund, or as an angel investor, I invested in PatientSafe, a San Diego company that has workflow management solutions for the nurse and clinical population. I think they're deployed in 80 hospitals. Also, Clario Medical has a workflow solution for radiology practices. And then in our current fund, Sure Clinical has moved clinical trial paperwork onto a cloud-based digital system with secure authentication. And then the company that Taha HealthX and we have in common is Moving Analytics, which is both a remote sensing app, patient interfacing app, and a nurse workflow, a cardiac rehab nurse workflow solution to bring the very essential cardiac rehab component of very serious cardiac procedures, make it more available, because most patients who are supposed to get it just can't make it back to the hospital to go through it. And it can be done, Kaiser and Stanford have proven that it can be done as well and even better in the home setting and get participation up from 20 to 80% or so. And then a final company that's kind of running under the radar but is taking advantage of some of that data kind of in the PBM space. There are many, many opportunities to take advantage of all that data that's out there that's very interesting. But let's talk about things that would be a no-go for you. And some people don't want to have to go through an FDA process with a solution. Some people do want to go through an FDA process. In part, it depends on who you're selling to. How do you approach, what are the things that you definitely want to see or definitely don't want to see, whether it's FDA or direct-to-consumer or only as prescribed by clinicians? Alana, let's start with you this time. Alona, sorry.
So I never, and I sort of insinuated this, but I'm very open-minded. I come from the therapeutic world, so FDA does not at all scare me at all. And in a way, it's a barrier to entry, so there's a lot to be said for it. Of course, I'd like the company to be further along and have a really compelling valuation, so the deal terms make sense. So again, it gets to that. So I don't have any hard and fast rules. It's all, it's all just part of a negotiation and looking at the team and understanding where you think they are add value and there's a differentiator. I like to see a large revenue stream that's potential, and that actually is really important to me. I just talked to someone and it was great revenue, but if you're going to tell me you're going to make, after 4 years, $20 million, it suddenly just burst, the balloon just burst. And I loved everything about the technology, but maybe because I'm in the therapeutic world, but I'm going in at the same valuation. I know the risk is a lot different, but I'm kind of a high risk, high reward kind of person. That's just my personality, so I shoot for the fences. And at 20 million, like even, fake it for all you guys out there that are entrepreneurs. We know you guys do that. So, don't be so conservative, because you really are shooting yourself in the foot. And, I guess a lot of people would kill me for saying that. But if you don't have confidence in yourself, we're already discounting it already. So, that's all I can say about that.
Great. Taha?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one, we don't invest in telehealth companies. I think for us, the way we view telehealth is it's turned more into a services play. So that's mainly why we generally don't go towards telehealth. As far as the FDA process goes, I think, like I mentioned earlier, we're very much focused on for health systems to work with our products. And a lot of times in the areas that we're working on, there isn't really the FDA milestones area. But what I will say is kind of building on what you left off is the first thing we look for, and being this early, outside of you, because you have a much bigger fund than all of us, but you have to sell passion, right? Like, the team is probably the most important thing. Early stage investing, it's fun for I think for all of us, because it tends to be very messy, but at the same time, you have to put your bet on a team. One of the areas I always, for us, we look at groups that have maybe 1 to 3 customers. But I can even tell you, a company like Redox now, where they're farther along, where they just closed their Series B. I've seen a lot of companies go out and close their seed and Series A with only 1 or 2 customers, if that, especially for seed. you have to sell the passion, because that's what we look for, because you're going to get a million no's. You're going to get so many no's, and you have to have that fortitude to keep moving forward. There's that, and then it's also evaluating the actual market, talking to your customers and talking with health systems, because I think for health systems, even though they're very much operate in silos, there is some form of calling a friend and saying, hey, look, what did you think of this company? And for us, it's implementation also has to be key.
Great, thanks. Alexander?
So, for us, one of the things that is definitely something that we believe that technology is usually only half of the solution. So if your company is predominantly a technology company with a little bit of a healthcare veneer, that's not of interest to us. It has to be really through and through, which is why oftentimes some of the AI companies don't quite cut it for us, because many times it's a technology looking for a solution, and what we want is a solution looking for technological advancement and help. The second thing that's really important for us, the way we're structured, is in principle we only make investments when we can see how we might onboard that company. And that takes many different forms. Historically, that meant if it's a compound or a device, we might see that we might actually eventually acquire that and bring it into the company, right? So what that means is that we wouldn't invest in something that has completely nothing to do with the rest of the company. And so in digital health and health tech, it's similar. It has to somehow fit in. But that having been said, we have made some acquisitions that you might not have thought of as the obvious choice at the time. For example, we acquired Baby Center, and it's been with us. And if you know, well, if you're a parent or a child, you know about baby shampoo, talcum powder, and so forth. So it makes sense from that context that we would have done that, but that is sort of beyond the technology again. It's an example of that. So those are some of the key watch-outs for us.
Naveed?
So I think Atala touched on it. I mean, digital health right now, it's, a ton of money has been thrown at the space, but there haven't been that many exits, right? And so when we look at something, I like the analogy of if you build something where your product or service is chemotherapy, people will pay any price. They need it to live. Not many things are chemotherapy. If you have something that's Advil, right? Someone has a headache, a migraine, they're going to pay for it. So there's various degrees of Advil, but if you could help get rid of headaches, you probably have something there. But if your product or service is a vitamin, my doctor says I'm vitamin D deficient. Some days I take it, some days I don't. It's neat, it's cute, it's going to fail. So I think there's a lot of stuff in digital health that is, frankly, vitamins, right? They're cute, they're neat, they don't make money, they only maybe get to 20 million in revenue, and so, we're early stage investors, and the way we function, we could entertain exits that are traditionally not attractive for later stage VC funds because they need to shoot for, billion-dollar exits on everything. But even that said, we want something to at least be an Advil that's solving a headache, not just something that's cute or neat. And so in that regard, we have one company that's going through FDA with CureMetrics because they're diagnostic. Their AI machine learning says you have breast cancer, so they have to go through FDA. CureMatch is a decision support tool. They don't. It's the oncologist that decides, and we go direct to consumer there. And the consumer pays $1,000 because they want to know what those recommended combination of drugs are that the oncologist then can decide to administer or not. So I think what's fascinating right now is that we're at that inflection point where at first it was important to gather the data, the values in the data, but I think where we're at now is, now let's find the needle in the haystack. So I think the next stage, and that's why these companies haven't had exits, is because they've had great ideas and they've gathered the data, but now you've got to unlock the value. You need to identify those needles. Or those diamonds in the rough, whatever analogy you want to use, and that's where we, at least with our premise, and that's why we started an AI lab, is because we're like, we want to have the best data scientists from all over the world, and we have I mean, it's like the United Nations there. We got Israeli, Indian, Chinese, Iranian, German, Ukrainian, like you name it, but they're the best in the world. They come to the US because they want to go to school here. UCSD and the Supercomputer Center is a gold mine of talent, and a lot of them end up going to the Valley. And in fact, the word is out now, so a lot of companies like Google are setting up shop here because like, wait a second, these people are coming from San Diego, let's set up shop there, we pay them half as much, commercial real estate costs half as much, and people would rather live here than San Jose. Sorry to anyone from San Jose. But, so for us, I mean, it's kind of a bittersweet thing where like, you know, we kind of have this secret to ourselves, but I think a rising tide lifts all boats, so we're happy that, you know, the word is out that, you know, there's this wealth of human capital here that's being attracted from all over the world. So it's, you know, I digress a little bit from the initial question, but I think that's really important to point out that right now it really is all about the talent. And, you know, when we look at something, other than identifying that it's at least an Advil, it's all about the team. And are they the domain experts? To Alexander's point, where they know what they're talking about cold, because we don't hold ourselves out to be healthcare experts or energy or real estate or fintech or ed tech. We want to find the people that are and partner with them or those corporations to build companies and unlock value and help those domain experts, you know, take it to, you know, build on what they know is a pain point.
So great answers. I would just add that you know, team is all important. We've never seen a team that was complete in a very early stage company, and it really is a process of stages in development and rollout and launch and scaling, and require different talent, frankly. And so one thing that we always look for is coachability and receptivity to accepting the later stage talent that will be needed for the company to be most successful. And we define talent actually very specifically. We want somebody we know they're going to succeed. How do we know that? Because they've succeeded previously selling a similar product to the same customers for a similar price. And those people know all of the process after the product development stage of really getting the product sold to those customers. And each little ravine, each little gully has its own little set of experts and its own little community. And if you've got somebody who's succeeded selling products into that space who likes your product, that's a good later stage validation from our perspective. So before I open it up to the audience, how should companies approach you? What's the best way for a company looking for funding from you to approach you? And let me start with you, Alexander, because you've got the most money.
So what I would recommend is to come in a targeted fashion. We have many entry points. You already talked about JLabs, we have the innovation centers, with JJDC, with different avenues. And I think what's important is for you to get familiar with the various avenues and figure out which way to come in. I recommend coming in once and not trying each and every way, because we amongst ourselves do talk and there's an ample communication. We know who all should be involved. And it usually does not reflect well when somebody says, yeah, I talked to these guys last week, they reached out to me. You know what, we know that, and so that's not helpful. We, as you know, are incredibly active in our various locations. Part of our philosophy has been that historically a pharma would sort of have their headquarters and all sort of investment and M&A decisions would be made there. We made a deliberate choice to start moving people away from the center out to the periphery. So we have our JLabs, one here in San Diego. We have an innovation center up here in Menlo Park. We have another innovation center in Shanghai. We have one in London. We have one in Boston. And JLabs, there's a Toronto, there's one in Houston. There is one in South San Francisco, in Boston as well, Cambridge. So there's a whole slew of those. And what I would recommend is go towards the entry point that is closest geographically to you. Because that's the whole point. The whole point is that we are there where your ecosystem is, so that we can get to know each other, maybe sometimes in an informal basis first, and get to know each other more closely, and have that personal touch. We believe very much that that's why we sort of decentralize that. It's not just geographically, it's also mentally, right? The people that are local here get embedded in the ecosystem, they think like the local ecosystem, and they sort of make it their goal, their mission to know anybody and anything that's going on here. And so make use of that.
Taha, let's move to you. Do you have to be from Madison and part of the University of Wisconsin to get your attention?
No. So we actually only have 2 companies in Madison. So the good thing about Epic is they have a 10 to 15% turnover rate each year. So the way I think of Epic now is kind of being the outsider. Is it's like a graduate program. You take kids right out of college, you place them into Epic, and now all of a sudden a year in, they're managing $30, $40 million contracts with major health systems, where a lot of patients' lives are depending on them. They're engaging directly with CIOs, and they're generally there for 3 to 4 years. And what happens is they're working 60 to 80 hours a week right out of college, but they're also making a lot of money. They're making 6 figures. So what's good for them is I always take Epic talent and place them within startups that I know. We have 4 companies in San Francisco, and 1 in Austin, and 1 in St. Louis, and 1 in Chicago. So definitely region isn't a thing for us. I will say, if you're looking for funding, this probably goes for all the funds you engage with, especially early stage, is coming through a connection. Or don't send me a blanket, cold email, like a sales outbound email. At least have something that's personal. If there is a connection that I know someone or something like that, or even something about me, reach out to me directly. And I think that's, or even reach out to some of our portfolio companies. As being a former entrepreneur, I recommend that to entrepreneurs in the room. If you're looking for funding and you're going down the pipeline and you've identified funds you want to engage with, talk to their portfolio companies. Get to know them, get to see how much coachability is there, how much resources there, and or introductions they do for you, and then go down that path.
Naveed?
Yeah, I think Taha made some fantastic points, as did Alexander. Just to follow up on what they said, in this day and age, with LinkedIn, with Twitter, with Facebook even, it's so easy to reach and contact pretty much anyone, whether it's a VC or a reporter or a celebrity, anything. So I would say use those tools, use LinkedIn, get the warm intro. Don't just send a cold email with 3 attachments, right? Because I get email anxiety. If my inbox gets too full, I'm going to delete those much faster than if Taha sends me an introduction. I'm going to take that out of respect for our relationship, right? And so it shocks me how many people will still just send the cold email, because it's so easy. Just get on LinkedIn and see who is connected, and it just takes 2 minutes to just take that extra step. On top of that, it's amazing how many entrepreneurs or founders don't do a little bit of homework, where you're contacting an investor that only does therapeutics and you're a medical device, or vice versa, or they only do Series A and you're looking for your first seed. So I think, or even down to the right partner, right? We're a small fund, but in some of the larger funds, the partners are even competitive with each other and in getting their bonuses. And so you contact the wrong partner, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to send your deal over to the right partner. So I think in this day and age, there's so much information out there. Just with a little homework, I think you could really laser focus and find the right investors, whether it's institutional or even on the angel level, of who's actually investing in the city or town you're in.
Great, thanks. Ilona?
Okay, and I'll keep it short because I know time is short. So sometimes you have no option but to just do a cold call. What I would suggest is timing is everything. Don't do it right before a convention, because our mailboxes are overflowing. I didn't get, and I hate this because I like to be respectful and at least look at and respond to each and every email that I get. I would have wanted it the other way around. So do it on an off, an off season or something like that. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have somebody, a connection and a warm intro. But if you don't be discouraged. I think it's good to just send cold, but again, timing's everything.
And I would just put a pitch in for Life Science Nation. They do a wonderful job of identifying exactly what investment funds are interested in and what stage and what criteria. And these programs do a good job of bringing people together, and that's really makes for the process to be more efficient. And I'll open it up for questions from the audience for our panel on digital health. Yes, sir.
So one of the things we have noticed, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got a company, we deal with digital health and complex care side of things. The barriers to entry on digital health are pretty low. And what we have found that understanding the market and understanding the money flow and how you make money out of this is probably more challenging than building the technology itself. So I don't know if you folks have seen that. It's been our experience. It took us 3 years to figure it out. But that's a big part of the journey in healthcare, digital healthcare. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that the technology is only a small part of what you're bringing out there. And to understand the relationships and actually who has the right incentives is absolutely critical. And it's very convoluted, and it's absolutely not straightforward, right? Is it the payer that is incentivized here? Is it the pharma company? Is it the health system? It really depends a great deal on the sophistication to understand that is something that ideally one would have going into a venture rather than building it up as part of the effort.
Yeah, what I've seen is the direct-to-consumer subscription is falling out of favor. It's just not working. I have not seen a lot of success with it, so I would spend more energy in enterprise relationships and contracts.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
Yeah.
We started on the B2C
Exactly.
4 years back. So.
Yeah.
And some of us are old enough to remember Healthion, which raised $1.2 billion 20 years ago to bring high tech to healthcare and solve the problem. And they ended up with WebMD and not much. I mean, it was. I think we think it's a common problem for technology people to think it's all about the technology, and we believe it's all about the markets and how you bring solutions to big problems in those specific markets. Other questions from our? Yes, sir.
So, as a fellow investor, you're always thinking about the exit. How do you guys think about? It came up on the panel that there haven't really been any major successes in terms of the exit on the digital health side. I mean, is that something that you think is going to change? Are we on the cusp of a series of big exits, or do you think that it's you just have to build sustainable, profitable businesses and look for a different path to liquidity?
Yeah. So I can try to make a stab at that. I definitely say in the mindset of, we're just at the cusp of it. I mean, digital health funding really started, the wave started around 2011, 2012. And now organizations are trying to figure out how to work with major corporations like Johnson & Johnson or even Optum and things of that sort. And then I would also actually even look at, some of the big four consultancies. Some of them are actually looking at evaluating, picking up some of these digital health solutions as well as services.
I agree 100% with what Tom said, and I think there was a certain amount of education that, frankly, was going on at the corporate levels, where now they're more comfortable and familiar with digital health, and they see the opportunities to affect their bottom lines as public companies. And so I think we will see more exits. For us and our model, because we deploy a venture studio model and get in as early as we do, we could entertain exits that are not traditionally attractive for Andreessen Horowitz, for example. So for us, if we get in a company and 2-3 years later it gets an offer for $80 million, that's attractive for us. That's not going to be attractive for an Upfront Ventures or Andreessen or Sequoia to entertain the potential for that. They aim much bigger. So I think there's going to be a lot of exits that are gonna be singles. And I think that's fantastic. Well, you know, get the singles and doubles, and if there's some home runs, you know, that much better.
And if you look at some of the acquisitions by companies like McKesson and others, there have been some significant exits. And you know, Epic was referred to earlier. They never exited, but they're worth I don't know how many billions. So there have been successes there. There is a big need for technology, digital technology in healthcare. Finding the right solutions is the challenge that I think we're excited about up here. And with that, I'll call time because we're past our time. And thank you for attending, and please have a thank you for our panel.